Hi guys, Jekyll here, and today I want to talk about the rotation I'm doing with my Stamina Nightblade in the Morrowind DLC. I think we're going to start with checking my skills that I'm using, and then we're doing a slow rotation to make sure you can keep up, and then we're doing a fast one afterwards. So starting with the bow, we have Rearming Trap here, which is our source of minor force, and also a very strong single target dot. Then we have another strong single target dot, Poison Injection, which is especially powerful if your target is below 50%. Then we have Endless Hail, very strong AoE, but also in single target the best dot we have at our disposal, especially combined with the Maelstrom bow. Then we have Razor Caltrops, which got changed quite a bit. It can now be used by multiple players in the raid, and its duration got decreased to 12 seconds, but it also deals more damage and it costs more, very much. So you have to make sure you can afford it in the current meta, because sustaining is really hard. Then we have a flex spot here. I use Mirage because it grants me some protection with minor resolve and minor ward and also major evasion. So that's cool, and I use it to have an assassination skill on my bar as well, because I need access to the hemorrhage passive, which increases my critical strike damage by 10%. So then we have the ultimate here. I use Flawless Stormbreaker to mitigate the weapon damage difference there is between bow bar and dual wield bar. So that's quite helpful. And yeah, it's basically here for the passive. I don't use it at all. If you want to use leeching strikes on the flex spot or something else, I suggest using Incap Strike here to make sure you have the hemorrhage passive on this bar as well. So switching to the dual wield bar here, we have Killer's Blade, our main execute skill. It's the spammable I use as soon as the target reaches 25%. Then we have Surprise Attack, or spammable for the rest of the fight, basically. You gain major fracture from it, which is not that big of a deal in a raid because you have a tank, and usually the tank does apply major fracture already, but there are always situations where you have to kill an ad, or the tank has to use range taunt. Anything can happen really, and having major fracture for yourself is really beneficial at some times. You also have the benefit of Shadow Barrier, because whenever you use Surprise Attack you gain major resolve and major ward, which increases the mitigation you have by 10%. That's also very nice. So in this setup, basically you have major and minor resolve and ward from surprise attacks and Mirage. So then we have Rending Slashes here, cool single target dot, and very cheap as well. Well, it got cost got increased, but it's still pretty cheap. And if you need to deal with a lot of ads, let's say you have trash packs to clear, you can use this spot to use Steel Tornado. So if you're not fighting single target only, use Steel Tornado here. Then we have Deadly Cloak, another source of damage mitigation for us, because if it's active you receive 25% less damage from AoE and boss attacks. That's pretty huge, and it's also a very decent single target and AoE dot, so having this one up most of the time is really beneficial. Then we have Relentless Focus. This one got changed in this patch also. You now don't have to recast the buff after the Spectral Bow was fired to have another Spectral Bow. So basically you use it, then you have to use 5 light or heavy attacks and use a Spectral Bow, and after another 5 light or heavy attacks you can shoot the bow again. So in theory, because the buff lasts 20 seconds, you could have 4 Spectral Bow procs, but in reality it's more like 2 or maybe 3 procs that you can actually use without smashing your whole rotation. I'm usually going to try to have 2 procs per cast, and that's pretty solid. So if you master this one, it will increase your DPS pretty much. Then we have my favorite, or my main ultimate I'm using. It's Incap Strike, and the reason I'm using that is because I wanted to go for War Machine, for the War Machine set that is available in also fabrication, and whenever I use an ultimate with War Machine, me and 2 of my allies get a major slayer, which increases the damage versus trial mobs by 15% for 10 seconds. And that's a very huge damage buff for my group, and that's why I want to use it, because Nightblades have a very good ultimate regeneration and a very cheap ultimate with in-cap strike. Yeah, that's basically the skills we're using. I have in my guide some alternatives or other options to use, but let's keep it simple here because the video doesn't have to take 30 minutes, you know. And well, let's start with the rotation. So let's talk about what we're going to do. First up, we want to buff with Relentless Focus, Deadly Cloak, and Mirage or Leeching Strikes, whatever you want to use. And then we start the fight by using Rearming Trap, Endless Hail, use Razor Caltrops, and then Poison Injection and Swap. So the reason we are starting with Trap and Endless Hail is because both have a time before they apply damage, both about 1.5 to 2 seconds. So that's why we start with those. And we want to swap cancel Poison Injection because single target dots gain the stats you have when they actually hit the target. So by swapping, Poison Injection gets empowered by the dual wield stats you have. On the dual wield bar then, we start up with a surprise attack to apply Major Fracture. Then we do Rending Slashes to have our dot up. Deadly Cloak is already running. And then we can basically start our burst phase, which means we're having all the dots running, we do an in-cap strike, and then we fire our spectral bow and use some surprise attacks until we have to go back to the bow bar and reapply our dots. So, and reapplying our dots always means rearming trap, arrow barrage, caltrops, and then poison injection swap. So here I switched Mirage for Reaper's Mark to have a higher Major Fracture uptime. I'm gonna buff up here and then apply Trap, Endless Hail, Razor Caltrops, Poison Injection, Rending Slashes, Ultimate, and then Burst Phase begins until I have to reapply the dots on the bow bar, as you can see here. And then you get a second Spectral Bow hit off, bam, and then you reapply dots and rebuff basically, and that's all you do. So let's try to get a real pass here on the 6 million dummy. And apologies that I can't talk and fight at the same time. I have to concentrate and I'm not a good multitasker, so apologies for that. And let's get started, I guess. So first mistake already, I forgot to apply Rending Slashes before I started my burst phase. Well, I guess we can keep going. In a longer fight there will always mistakes be happening, so it's not that big of a deal. Sure, in such a short fight it will make a difference, but I think we just keep going. It will be fine in the end. Here's another important thing you have to keep in mind, and that is not getting too greedy in the execute phase. I know it's tempting to spam Killer's Blade with light attacks in the execute phase, but you have to always make sure you can sustain the next round. In this case, I was almost too greedy, so keep that in mind and use me as a bad example. So that's it. Made a few mistakes at the beginning, but went quite smooth in the end. So let's check the parse here. 80% uptime of poison injection is pretty good because your duration of poison injection is 10 seconds while you swap depending on Endless Hail, which is 12. So 80% uptime is pretty good. Then let's check here. Minor Berserk, almost 100%. Not exactly perfect, but it's okay. Everything over 95 is okayish because sometimes it just doesn't align with the bar swapping. Deadly Cloak doesn't have to be always 100% up. If it's not up for 3 seconds or something, it's not a big deal because it only applies damage every 3 seconds. So not much to say here. Okay, that's it. Hope you enjoyed it and hope it helps you perfectioning your build. As always, all you need to do is practice, 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 and check your combat metrics afterwards, check your buff uptimes, check your DPS. Then you can try to analyze what went wrong or what was good and try to improve step by step. So much for that. Have a nice day. See ya.